Good day, everyone. So now we are gonna talk about the chicken excretory system. Okay, so what are the functions of the chicken excretory system? So the functions of the excretory system is to manage the acid-base balance of the chicken's body, to excrete water and excrete metabolic waste. So I'm sorry doon sa aking typo. It's supposedly excretory, not respiratory system. So please pardon me. So and the functions of this excretory system is for homeostasis or for the balance, and kidneys. So the kidneys excrete or secrete uric acid as the byproduct of metabolism, and the gastrointestinal tract secretions. And here in the excretory system of the chicken, there will be no sweat glands that is released. And also we are gonna talk about the water loss. So here, these are the parts of the excretory system. So there are three major organs of the chicken's excretory system. That's kidney, that's the ureter, and the cloaca. Those are the pointed by the arrow there, as you can see on our screen. So two kidneys, each with a ureter that carries the urine produced by the kidneys to the cloaca, where it leaves the body. So take note here that there will be or there are no or there is no urinary bladder in bird. Okay, especially it's sa lahat po ng mga uh, ibon na natin. So because it reduces the body weight of a chicken and thus facilitates the flight. So the urinary component of chicken excretes together with feces. Okay? So isa lang yung daluyan ng dumi nila, and then yung kanilang urine. So each ureter of the chicken urinary system is divided into the renal part and the pelvic part. So the renal part is embedded chiefly into the substances of the kidney, and in addition, the pelvic region of the chicken ureter runs from the caudal end of the kidney to the cloaca. So thus, both the ureters of a chicken opens at the dorsal aspect of the urodeum. So what's the urodeum or the urodeum? So that's the area that collects urine directly from the ureters. So as you can see there, there's uro or urodeum. Okay, next. So there are this is the chicken kidney anatomy. So there are three lobes of chicken kidney. So the two kidneys of a chicken symmetrically placed on either side of the vertebral column. So therefore, they remain in contact dorsally with the pelvis and synsacrum. What's the synsacrum? So yung synsacrum po is a unit formed by the fusion of the posterior thoracic, lumbar, and sacral vertebrae. So the fusions of these bones make birds sturdy and indirectly lighter by decreasing the numbers of muscles necessary to control individual vertebrae. So there are three lobes of kidney. So we have cranial lobe, we have middle lobe, and we have caudal lobe. So each lobe has cortical or outside and medullary or the inside areas. So each lobe is further subdivided into small lobules. So kidney tubule or nephron is the basic functional unit of the kidney, and averagely the length of kidney is about 7 centimeters and the greatest transverse width is about 2 centimeters. So yung color din nila is like as in humans, the color of kidney is brown. So now let's talk about the nephron. So as like I've said earlier, so the nephron is the basic functional unit of the kidney. So nephrons are responsible for filtering the liquid waste left after digestion, reabsorbing any last useful substances, and secreting the waste to dispose of it. So each nephron is composed of a renal corpuscle or a network of capillaries enclosed in the Bowman's capsule, which is a proximal convoluted tubule leading away from the Bowman's capsule, and a loop of Henle. So meron yan kapag yung type ng ating nephron is mammalian type. And a distal convoluted tubule and collecting tubule that leads to the ureter. Okay, so there are two types of nephrons. So we have reptilian type. It is located in the cortex and lacks a loop of Henle. So the mammalian type naman, it has a well-defined loops of Henle that are grouped into the medullary cortex. So it has a countercurrent mechanism, meaning it maintains a cortico-medullary osmotic gradient. So the concentration of urine takes place. So as you can see here, so I have a photo or an illustration about the types of nephrons. Yan, for the reptilian type and for the mammalian type. Next, let's talk about the blood supply. Okay, blood supply. The renal artery, the afferent arteriole, and the glomerular capillaries. So, the efferent arterioles from glomerular reptilian type nephrons empty into sinuses surrounding the cortical tubular elements, thereby forming the peritubular blood supply. And efferent arterioles leaving glomeruli of mammalian type nephrons enter the medullary cones to form a mesh-like network of vessels, the vasa recta. So the afferent arterioles are a group group of blood vessels that supply the nephrons in many excretory systems. So the afferent arteriole actually plays an important role in the regulation of blood pressure as part of the tubuloglomerular feedback mechanism and scheme of renal tubules and its vascular supply. So peritubular capillaries are tiny blood vessels supplied by the efferent arteriole that travels alongside nephrons, allowing reabsorption and secretion between blood and the inner lumen of the nephron. So, looking back at the vasa recta that I have said earlier, vasa recta of the kidney are the straight arterioles and the straight venules of the kidney, which is a series of blood vessels in the blood supply of the kidney that enters the medulla as the straight arterioles and leave the medulla to ascend to the cortex as the straight venules. So here, merong important term dito that we have to know, the renal portal system or the RPS. So this is the second afferent blood supply to the kidney. The second afferent blood supply to the kidney. So this is the structure and the function of the nephron. So looking back at the nephron, this is the structure and the function of the nephron. So we know that there are three roles of nephron for filtration, for reabsorption, and desecretion. So for filtration is the pressure forces water and dissolve substances from glomerular blood into Bowman's capsule, and it amounts to 125 ml per minute. So reabsorption, this is the function of the nephron wherein the return of the substances from the filtrate to the blood and interstitial fluid. So water by osmosis wherein the NaCl, glucose, and amino acids are transport or by active transport. Next is desecretion. This is the active release of substances by the tubular lining cells into the nephron tubule. So it gets rid of the toxins and residues, electrolyte balance mostly releasing potassium, and acid-base balance by releasing H ions and the NH4 ions. Okay? So the top of capillaries is known as the glomerulus. So as you can see here, if I'm going to zoom it, the glomerulus, there. The glomerulus which is encapsulated or enclosed by the Bowman's capsule. And as you can see here, the Bowman's capsule has many layers. So we have visceral layer at the inside, at the middle side that's capsular space, and the parietal layer at the outside, no? Outside layer. So blood is filtered by the glomerulus and the filtrate is taken up by the Bowman's capsule. So the filtrate is made up of waste products as well as the useful products such as water and the electrolyte. And the filtrate from the Bowman's capsule is passed down to the proximal convoluted tubule, loop of Henle, distal convoluted tubule, and they ultimately to the collecting ducts. So passing through the tubular portion of the nephrons, the useful substances from the filtrate are taken up by the network of capillaries which surrounds the nephron. And the network is known as the vasa recta that I have said earlier. The vasa recta, which is the straight arterioles, and the straight arterioles, especially here in mammalian type of nephrons. So like I've said earlier, that the renal portal system is the second afferent arteriole. So this is the venous blood arriving by means derives from the hind limbs via the external iliac and sciatic veins. So it enters at the level of peritubular capillaries and it supplies half to 2/3 of blood supply to the kidney. So what are the importance of this renal portal system? So this is very important for birds. So it helps in precipitation of uric acid, wherein the uric acid is need to be precipitated because of increase in blood flow. So this will prevent the obligatory water loss. Secondly, so it maintains blood supply. So if there is constriction of efferent and afferent arteriole, thus results to decrease of blood supply. So this is regulated and maintained by extra blood supply by the RPS. So bakit kailangan nila ito? Because like I've said earlier, most of the birds are flight birds or some hindi nakakalipad, no? Pero kailangan nila itong extra blood supply in case na makulangan sila, since kailangan nga nila ng active ng blood supply. So next is the urine formation. So as we all know that we have three urine formation. We have glomerular filtration, tubular reabsorption, and tubular secretion. So kailangan lang natin tandaan dito that the end product of urine formation is the uric acid. So this is the main end product of nitrogen metabolism. So it avoids obligatory water loss and created by NaCl transport from the thick limbs of loop of Henle. And there is no role of urea. Okay? So let's talk about glomerular filtration. So glomerular filtration, wherein the fluid pressure forces water and dissolved substances from glomerular blood to Bowman's capsule. And the filtration, so the filtration po is averaging 125 ml per minute from 2 kidneys. And more than 99% must be returned to the blood. And this in filtration, it involves the small molecules, water, like water, electrolytes, urea, glucose, amino acids, and etc. So it does not involve in the blood proteins or cells. So the large amount of filtration is the result of the porous glomerular membrane and filtration slits in the visceral layer of the Bowman's capsule. Next is the tubular reabsorption. This is the return of the useful substances from the filtrate to the blood capillaries or interstitial fluid. So NaCl, that involves active transport and water by osmosis, wherein water is reabsorbed by the osmosis. So dito nangyayari yung reabsorption. So entering the proximal convoluted tubule, the filtrate is very dilute compared to the blood, and 65% of water reabsorption occurs from the proximal convoluted tubule as a result of this osmotic gradient. So as the filtrate enters the descending limb of the loop of Henle of mammillary nephrons with long loops, it is exposed to increasingly hypertonic medulla. So this pulls at least another 20% of absorbable water out of the filtrate. So next is the glucose. Okay, glucose and amino acid. So yun po yung mga nire-reabsorb here in tubular reabsorption. The NaCl, yan, the water, and the glucose and the amino acid. Next is the tubular secretion. So it is one of the many steps in the process of filtering blood to produce liquid waste in the form of urine. So within the excretory system of many organisms, this is important for both waste removal and the acid-base balance. So in an excretory system, so hormones are also involved, and it has important functions. Like for example, the arginine vasotocin or the ADH. Yan. So for water reabsorption. So this is for water reabsorption. Next is the angiotensin, angiotensin 2. So it depends on osmotic status, no? So it is responsible for natriuresis and diuresis along with the anti-natriuresis and anti-diuresis according to the needs of water conservation. When I say natriuresis, NATRIURESIS, this is the excretion of an excessively large amount of sodium in the urine. And natriuresis is similar to diuresis. So wherein the excretion of an unusually large quantity of urine, except that the natriuresis, the urine is exceptionally salty. Next hormone is the aldosterone. So this is the principal regulator of potassium concentration, and it is also responsible for the reabsorption of sodium and excretion of the potassium in the filtrate. Next is the ANP or the atrial natriuretic peptide. It is the release from the atrium of heart and is responsible for natriuresis as well as diuresis in the case of birds. Next hormone is the arginine vasotocin. So arginine vasotocin is responsible to dehydration. In response to dehydration, the pituitary gland releases this AVT or arginine vasotocin. So into the blood and in the kidneys, AVT causes a reduction in the glomerular filtration rate. So less water moves from the blood into the kidneys. And it increases the permeability of the walls of collected ducts to water by opening protein water called the aquaporins. Next is the parathyroid hormone. So this is the PTH. So for calcium reabsorption and phosphate excretion. Next is the renin-angiotensin-aldosterone system or the RAAS. And so this is a series of reactions designed to help regulate blood pressure. And when blood pressure falls, so the kidneys release the enzyme renin into the bloodstream for emergencies. So it is also important for us to know the postrenal modification. So postrenal modification, so it occurs in most colons and lesser extent in ceca. So it is the backflow or retrograde flow of the blood, and the water absorption from the colon follows the active reabsorption of sodium ion. So the urine and mixed with feces is cream colored and contains thick mucus. So mucus secretion helps transport of the precipitated solutes. So avian salt glands have nasal glands. So these glands secrete salts, and it functions only when there is a salt load. Otherwise, they are at rest. So as a learning check, so based on sa na-discuss natin, so what are the types of nephrons of Aves? So these are mammalian and the reptilian type. So, and lastly, what is the end product of nitrogen metabolism? So, instead of urea, so that would be uric acid. And these are my references. Thank you so much for listening. Thank you po. So, that's the end of my report.